of the candidates, e4 has been played by Fabiano. And will Nakamura respond with the super solid e5, which is part of his repertoire? No, he goes for the Sicilian. He is going in for the fight against Caruana. The knight comes out to f3, and Hikaru plays his pawn to d6. Generally, when d6 is played, we expect the Sicilian Najdorf to happen. Will Caruana play the open Sicilian, or will he go for the check here? It's known as the Moscow variation. Well, he goes for d4. Very logical move, and I think the best move there, takes. Knight takes on the board, and now Caruana has played the open Sicilian. Hikaru goes knight f6 here, and Fabi plays his knight to c3. a6 is the Najdorf, but Hikaru plays e5, and you look at Fabi. He looks up. e5 is not a common move here. It's something which has not been played many times just because of this. Bishop b5 check. And now it's tricky, because if you play bishop d7, I take, and play knight d2, and everything's perfect. So he goes knight d7. And here, the added move that white has up his sleeve is knight f5, attacking the d6 pawn. Will Caruana play it? Yes, he does. Knight f5. He seems to be well prepared. But of course, Hikaru too will be prepared here. He goes a6, and he tells Fabi that if you take here, I will take back with the queen, defending this. It's possible to play this, and actually can happen, but Caruana plays bishop a4. And Hikaru comes back. He has 1 hour 58 minutes on the clock. He's well prepared here, and now pushes his pawn to b5, pushing away the bishop. Now, one of the big problems in black's camp is this d5 square, which is terribly weak, but Hikaru is playing around it. He defends the d6 pawn and also wants to chop off the bishop on b3. Bishop comes out to g5 to take away one of the defenders of the d5 square. Next, the knight can reroute itself there, but Hikaru simply chops it off before the knight can actually move away. Very interesting opening here. New opening, in fact, not really seen at top level that often. E takes f5, and now he breaks the pin with bishop e7. Of course, it's clear that Caruana is slightly better here, and he takes on f6. Very nice move. And now after bishop takes f6, what has essentially happened, which you can see, is that this bishop can actually sit down here on a beautiful square, but you can't do it straight away because rook c8, and then black is doing okay. I mean, you can play this way, but Caruana first decides to castle. And now look at this. Imagine a knight sitting here against this bishop. That would be so terrible. That would be just horrible. And so Hikaru plays e4, opening up this bishop, hoping that he can actually sacrifice his bishop for that. This is a very interesting moment now in the game. And Caruana sacks a knight. He takes knight e4. What a move. The point is, if you take back, which Hikaru most likely will, yes, now you want to play rook e1 and pin this knight to the king. And that is his idea. And he plays it, rook e1. No point in playing your pawn to d5 to protect it, because the bishop will simply take it, attacking the rook and the knight. So Hikaru says, let me get out of here. He castles. Caruana takes on e4. He's a pawn up. Also, he can put his queen here, then bring his other rook in, maybe play c3 to limit this bishop. But Hikaru says, well, nothing of that's going to happen. I first will chop off one pawn. Bishop takes b2. Caruana plays rook b1, and he's recovered his material, and Hikaru wants to go back. Yes, he goes bishop back to f6. Now, let's take stock of the situation. This bishop is active, but is on the diagonal that's not very, very relevant, while this bishop is on the money diagonal. It's a beautiful one. The queen moves in. So you can see how white is playing on the light squares, while black is trying to play on the dark squares. And it's very clear to me that Caruana is slightly better, pressing here. Nothing significant as such, because even if black loses this pawn on d6 but is able to trade the queens, it should be fine. So rook c8 played, and this is very interesting because if you play rook d1 and win this pawn, this is exactly what we were talking about. It's not the end of the world for black, but Caruana starts to now say, this is a weak pawn, I'll win it at some point. I'm going to attack all these pawns now. Wow, Hikaru Nakamura now has to be careful. He brings his rook up to c5, attacking the pawn on f5. But maybe Fabiano is okay to lose that pawn because it's a doubled pawn. If you see the pawn on f5, you can give it up. You can chop off the pawn on a6. He takes on a6. Very interesting now. Hikaru must take the pawn on f5, otherwise he's just a pawn down. Yes, he takes it, rook takes f5 played, and now you will see that the rook from here defends the pawn on b5. Although the pawn on d6 is weak, and Caruana now brings the rook in to attack that weakness. How is Hikaru going to respond to this move? Well, he pushes his pawn to d5 and he says that right now my rook is protecting here. But guys, don't you think that this pawn is weak here? Yes, Caruana plays rook b4. b5 pawn is now toasted. It's losing. You're losing that pawn, but queen e7 is the best move. And let's say if you take here, there's already queen e2 attacking here and pinning here. But Hikaru does not play queen e7. He plays bishop c3, which is actually a mistake. And it's based on a miscalculation because now Caruana takes and Hikaru has a tactic in his mind. He takes on f2. Look at that move. His point is if you take with the king, there's a check. King goes back, check, king h1, bishop e5, g3 is met with bishop g3, h3 with queen g3, and that was his point of rook takes f2. But Caruana calmly takes on d5 and he says to Hikaru, well, I now have two passers here. Yes, this was a beautiful tactical move that you found, but it is not helping you in any way. Well, Hikaru has to be careful now. He plays queen h4. I like this move. You can't push g3. You'll get checkmated in one move. But now it's time to bring your queen back to safety. Yes, he plays it. Queen d3 attacking the bishop. And white king is safe for the time being. Nothing much is happening here. Hikaru brings his rook back to f6. Clearly you mustn't take here. Queen f2 and queen f1 is a checkmate that happens. So that's why he plays g3. Nice move here, attacking the queen. The queen has to move away. And now Hikaru comes back. Well, Caruana is simply dominating the game. Queen b4 played. And now you can just trade off one of the active rooks. King takes f1, put the king on g2, push your pawn to a4. White is having all the fun here. But Caruana wanted to play rook f1, but then he changes his mind. He goes king g2. Which is also a fine move. It's no problems there. Only problem that white has is that his king is slightly weak. You know, you will say that there are only two pawns sheltering the king. Bishop b2 played by Hikaru. Can Fabi start pushing his pawn? Well, he goes rook f5 and you see he's now tempted to trade that active rook of black. But maybe not the most ideal way to do it. Because now Hikaru plays g6. And Fabi takes. Bishop takes f6. And now the point is that this rook on d5 was more active than the rook on d1. So overall, it seems like black has gained from this trade-off. Like if you play rook f1, which is a nice move, black simply goes king g7 and keeps everything together. He plays queen f3. Black comes back queen e7. And I think what Hikaru is essentially telling Fabiano is that, hey, look, it's very difficult for you to start to push your pawns on the queen side. Meanwhile, I'm going to create play with h5, h4 perhaps. He plays a4 anyway. Caruana pushes the pawn. And where does Hikaru bring his rook? Well, first he decides that he wants to improve his king. Good decision. And now Caruana, can he push the pawn? Is this a good idea? Why not, right? Just push the pawn forward. Well, maybe that's the way you want to play. Yes, he pushes the pawn forward. He maybe can get a6 and bishop c4. That would be pretty strong. He can also put his bishop here once in the center, and then this pawn really starts to roll. What is Hikaru going to do? And what is his idea? Well, he's looking to move the rook, maybe to c8. No, he plays rook a8. What a nice move, because queen a8 is met with queen e2 check, and you lose this rook. That is the point. So he plays rook d5, trying to defend the pawn. And now Hikaru just plays rook a7. This rook not only stops the pawn, but also defends f7. Now Caruana plays his rook to b5. He puts his rook on b5, and Hikaru now goes queen to d8. Well, he puts his queen on d8 square, and maybe he just wants to enter here on d2. That is his idea. And you can see that because of the weakness of the white king, black is constantly getting some play. He plays his rook to d5. Queen can come back to e7 and repeat the position, but Hikaru goes queen c7 and tells Fabi, how are you going to defend the a5 pawn? You're simply losing it. So maybe Caruana can shift his attention to this pawn now. He plays pawn to h4, and his point is, if you take here, take here, take here, he wants to enter with queen b7 and attack this pawn, which cannot be defended. Look closely there. So maybe Hikaru has to be careful. Oh, he takes it. He takes it. He's unfazed. Hikaru seems to be okay with this next move, queen b7, because if that's not coming, black is completely fine. Yes, queen b7. There's simply no way to defend this. What does Hikaru Nakamura have on his mind? You can see him very calm and relaxed, which means he already has seen the solution here, what he wants to do. Yes, he just plays queen d8 and he defends the bishop. So if Fabi takes here, which he does, then he plays his king to h6, and now the queen is coming in to give checks here to the king, and that seems like a perpetual check. So again, if you think about it, Caruana here got a great position out of the opening, was pressing endlessly. By the way, this is the 40th move, so the players are going to get 30 minutes extra now. Hikaru plays his queen to e7, offering a trade. This endgame is drawn because this bishop controls the c pawn. The king can come back into the game, and this is so you don't take the queens. Caruana, you can see, is assessing what happens if he takes the queen there, but I think he'll refrain from it, and he plays his queen back to c4. And Hikaru seems to have wriggled out of the mess. Well, he comes in queen e3 and offers a draw here to his opponent, because now bishop e5 attacks here. And well, it's not very common that the player who's pawn down offers a draw, but here I think Hikaru is very sure that he's completely fine, and a draw has been accepted. That's the end of the game.